Hello, Jean. Hello, Suzanne. How are you both doing? Ooh, let me get my sound on to make sure I can hear you guys. Oh, Jean, you are muted.
Sorry about that. I'm well, thanks.
Perfect.
Everyone, and welcome to the Governor's Council on Women and Girls. And this is our leadership panel. And our panel discussion today is focused on domestic violence. And we are doing this panel because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Domestic violence is not an easy topic to cover. And so we wanted to bring together a panel of women leaders who can showcase several different perspectives. First, we wanted the perspective of a leader who can share viewpoints from a coalition of organizations that are working to provide critical support to victims and survivors. And we also thought, for purposes of today's discussion, that it was important to hear from women who've actually survived domestic violence. Storytelling is a powerful tool, and today you are going to hear from some women who will be able to speak to their own experiences and learn how they identified that they were in a dangerous situation that required action and the steps they took to get help. And finally, how they have gone from surviving to thriving. I think these will be some very powerful and very insightful stories and inspirational stories. We hope that those of you tuning in will be inspired to be advocates for women and girls in your lives who may find themselves in this situation, and we'll be able to help take critical steps to get them the help that they need. And to those women and girls who currently find themselves in a domestic violence situation, we hope that these stories are going to encourage you to take action and to let you know how you can get help. I want to thank each of our panelists for joining us today. So let's begin. We're going to start with introductions, and I'll ask everyone to take turns introducing yourselves, starting with Megan and Jean, and then to this afternoon's spotlights, our survivors.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Bicewicz, and thank you for hosting this, for your leadership on this issue, and thanks for everybody taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. And thank you to Jean as well. She's one of our amazing executive directors at one of our member programs in the state, and she's done an amazing job in the greater Torrington area, Northwest Corner, serving both survivors of domestic and sexual violence for many years. So I'm excited to be with you today. I'm the CEO here at CCADV. I've been in my role for just over 3 years. And for those that don't know about CCADV, we are made up of 18 member programs across the state serving domestic violence victims and survivors through counseling services, shelter services, court-based advocacy, child and family advocacy, and so many other services that I know Jean will cover. And we focus mostly on advocacy, outreach, education, training, and technical assistance on the statewide level, and work with all of our member programs to be able to elevate the voices of victims and survivors at the state level. So thanks for having us.
Hi, thank you, Lieutenant Governor Bicewicz and Megan. And I am Jean Fusco. I am the Executive Director at Susan B. Anthony Project. I have been at Susan B. Anthony Project for the last 30 years. I am particularly grateful for those survivors who are going to speak today and tell their stories, because it is that strength and the bravery to step forward in the midst of trauma that makes all the difference for others who may be silently experiencing those things that they hear about from survivors. And at Susan B. Anthony Project, as Megan said, we focus on domestic and sexual violence. We have, in the last 20 years, become a trauma-informed, trauma comprehensive organization, which basically means that everything that we do has the trauma lens, and that we understand how trauma has such an impact on victims and survivors of domestic and sexual violence. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here today with you.
I think we have Adana, who's one of the members of our Survivor Leadership Council, which I know we're going to talk about later, but Adana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. So my name's Adana. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and I have been impacted by CCADV in the best way possible in their member organization. Susan, I pass it over to you.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Schreiber, and I am a survivor of domestic violence. I have to say, CCATV is amazing, but I have to really say Susan B. Anthony really, really saved my life. And I am so grateful for Susan B. Anthony. So.
Anyone else who would like to introduce themselves?
Over to you, LG.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to start with the topic of recognizing signs of abuse. Dating violence can start out very subtly. Sometimes people don't even realize they're being controlled or manipulated in a situation that is escalating either toward emotional or physical abuse. And many of these abuse forms are known as coercive control. So, Jean, I was hoping you could maybe talk about some of the most common types of coercive control and perhaps some of the types that are not so common.
Yes, thank you. I think it's really important that we focus on coercive control. Generally, there are those who may believe that domestic violence is about anger. And while anger may be a part of what one experiences in domestic violence, that control aspect is the piece that is really the piece that almost everyone that I talk to identifies. And it starts in most common form as verbal and emotional threatening. It leads one to be fearful for their own safety or the safety of others. One might threaten not only a person who is experiencing domestic violence directly, but members of their family, their children, their friends. And so in that particular way, it oftentimes begins subtly and becomes very pervasive. It is ongoing. And what happens is many times it can escalate to physical and even within the physical violence, sexual violence. And also we see more and more that coercive control exists in ways in which one's financial capabilities are also being controlled. There is more and more we're seeing where there are credit impacts, debt is established in the name of someone who is in that relationship and being controlled. There is the coercion sometimes, for instance, to as an example, sign for a car and then never have access to that car. isolation is a really critical piece of the way in which domestic violence survivors are controlled. And by isolating, it allows that coercion to continue in a stronger way as it separates from those people who have been the natural strengths and supports for survivors. And so in those kinds of ways, I see the most typical view of what happens in a controlling relationship. And with more frequency, I see a lot of technological abuse happening in the form of tracking devices in cars, which are as simple as, air tags these days and easily to be retrieved online. Phones that are connected to each other. This relationship is so amazing, and we're just going to be connected all the time. And so one cannot receive phone calls or messages without them being connected to the other. And in addition to that, we're even seeing an increase in technical abuse that includes the installation of indoor cameras, where every single action that's happening in the home can be tracked, even when the abuser is away from the home. So there is really no time where an individual may feel comfortable enough to be reaching out or to have any space to themselves in their home, in their own home, which should be their safe place.
Thank you. And I am going to ask if you are a relative, a friend, a family member, what signs should you be looking for that might indicate that someone is being coercively controlled?
I think as an example, one of the things that I would recommend is that when one notices that the behaviors of an individual has changed, that may be the moment at which they begin to question what is leading that change. And as an example, this may be a friend or a family member who has very frequently and consistently been engaged in family activities or friend activities, and all of a sudden they are withdrawing from those kinds of engagements, and they are giving maybe they're missing more events, and maybe they're giving fewer reasons why, or making up some reasons about why they are, and they're just not ringing true. I always say to folks, trust your gut. That feeling that feels like something is wrong is likely to be true, that something is not helpful right in that moment in that person's lives, and reaching out to them and letting them know that you are there for them regardless of them missing events or those kinds of things. And then I also think that sometimes we might say or see that somebody is reporting a number of household accidents. I stumbled and I have this bruise. I stubbed my foot, and so I'm having difficulty walking right now. And so I also would say that in addition to some of the behavioral changes that I mentioned, I have known individuals who have been really fervent professionals and have been employed at work, and all of a sudden they're having trouble keeping a job. And some of the kinds of abuse and coercion that could be happening in that relationship is they're not being allowed to go to work every day. They may be losing their job because of some of that coercion, and that's a part of the isolation as well. And it also feeds right into that financial control, where if one does not have a sense or a source of finance, then they remain because it's more difficult to step away from that relationship.
So I would like to ask our survivors, Adana and Suzanne, whether either of you experienced any of these kinds of coercive abuse, and if you would also like to perhaps share some of the red flags or warning signs that tipped you off that something was wrong?
Well, yes, I did. For me, it was he was the breadwinner in our household, so all the finances filter through him. I would say, does it feel like you're in a partnership or are you being parented? And that's definitely a defining moment to recognize, okay, this isn't normal. With a parent, you're going to have to ask permission for everything. With a partner, you'll have a level of say so of what will go on in the relationship, financially, even down to where your whereabouts. It's common to, for safety, let someone know you're going out, you'll be back, but you shouldn't have to ask if you can go. You shouldn't have to be back by the time they set in place. And those things can then isolate you because the less places you can go, the less people you meet. Maybe you can't go to work as often. And for me, with us having a child, it was easy to do because it was as simple as you can't take him this place. And then I couldn't go. You can't leave him. So then I couldn't work. And that plays a part in assisting with leaving because to leave, you need to have stuff. But I would also say to any victims out there that they're scared of, I don't want to leave until I have that in place. By getting connected with member organizations, they'll assist with that portion. So that shouldn't be a fear factor. Of course, I didn't know that while in it, but that is something I learned after the fact. With the coercive control part, if you can just get out to a member organization, they'll assist you along the way with getting connected with a job, babysitting, childcare, how to pay for it. So that was the thing that kept me the longest.
Thank you, Adonna. Suzanne?
Yeah, I think for me, it was, it was my second marriage. I was a professional. I was an assistant director of nursing. And for me, it was the typical love bombing. Everything was amazing. So you kind of, for me, I was blinded by that. And, when I first really was realizing what was going on was when I was on call this particular weekend, and I ended up having quite a few phone calls. And my ex, made sure he got rid of that phone. So then it made it hard for me to go to work. And then it was controlling the finances. So that is definitely, it was huge, controlling the finances. He would even do things like hide my cell phone, hide the car keys. Um, and I think being, it happened to me as I was older and established. For me, it was like, oh, I can't believe, like, how do I get out of this? How am I allowing this? So for me, unfortunately, like Adana, it happened too late. Um, an incident transpired, but once I was able to connect with Susan B. Anthony, it was like I was able to put that all in place and I was able to focus. And I think, for somebody who's in the mix of it, they just have to know that there's resources out there and you have to have a plan. You have to make a plan before you leave.
Thank you both. And I think this is a good segue because you both were experiencing this coercive control. So Adonna, and then we'll ask Suzanne, can you share perhaps a defining moment or a point when you said, okay, I have to get out of this situation? And what was that? And then if you could tell us what you did to get help.
Absolutely. I'll never forget it. It was the night my 1-year-old was sick. I was pregnant, and we had been advised by his pediatrician, you have to take him to the emergency room immediately. He was having difficulty breathing. And I remember him saying, no, I'm going to give him water and you're going to go back to bed. And I'm like, I can't let this one go. We have to get him out. And it was the way I don't know, he's stood up in my face many of times, but it was what was at stake and the way he stood in my face and said, I'm not doing it. And of course, a physical altercation happened after that. But instead of covering for him or hiding, I took my son and that was it for me. And that was my moment. How I got out from there was he did take all the cell phones, house phone, everything out the house. So I did have to go on my laptop and reach out to my sister via email who sent an Uber and I got to the hospital. Now with Yale Hospital, if they suspect domestic violence, they will keep you safe in the room. You stay there until they feel like it's safe for you to leave. They will make sure a social worker comes in and talks to you. They have all of CCADV's information, their member organizations. They'll have the ones that are closest to you, and you can get connected from there. My organization at the time was the Hope Center, and they were incredible. They provided all the resources that you need immediately, legal assistance. I even got to take my son to a therapist to see how he'd been impacted by the event. So I would say the plans that we have in place, providing that they stay funded, they work and they save lives, because if not for that, I don't know what I would have done or where I would have gone from there. Because I really left with no clue, like out the house to the hospital, clothes on my back with a baby. And the member organizations made it easier to then take over my lease, get it everything over to my name. I got connected with the right attorneys, and that stuff being in place, it changes your life. It saves your life, really.
Thank you. Suzanne?
So my situation ended kind of violently, and it was, I made the decision, but I remember that morning. I remember the morning was he was just so incredibly enraged. And I remember saying to myself, I looked in the mirror and I said, okay, this has to stop. But I'm not sure how it's going to stop. But it ended up in a violent situation. Um, and I have to say, if things had not transpired the way that they did, where the police ended up arresting him, and he is now incarcerated for his actions. But I don't know. I'm not sure how that would have happened, but I knew I was getting ready to put a plan in place. But once it all, unfolded, I was just so lucky to be connected to Susan B. Anthony. And, they really were amazing.
Thank you. And Adana, you mentioned your sister. So I want to ask if there were any women in your life, and Suzanne, I'll ask you as well, who were advocating for you as you were going through this coercive control.
Absolutely. There were all strong women in my life. I hate to stick Megan out on the call, but it was women like my sister who gave me a safe place, my mom who is fearless. It was honestly watching Megan at the first press conference I ever went to. We were both pregnant and she was the sweetest, kindest person, but she also spoke with strength and she commanded the room. And I'm like, there's no reason for me to be beating myself down here and let this continue in my mind. So there were a ton of women who advocated for me. Paula at the Hope Center. I feel like I was fortunate to have a team of the strongest women advocating on my behalf. And that makes all the difference. Even the way advocates show up, like the way Megan showed up. I don't think she showed up going, I'm going to specifically change her life today by being myself. The way you command yourself at press conferences, all those little things victims are watching and they're pulling strength from you. And it's really, really important to have women in spaces in power walking out their purpose to empower other women. Like, it doesn't end there. So I had about a million advocates, and they were all women, down to my police officer who physically ran after him on one occasion, a female French tip, tiny little female, and they were getting the jobs done, and they stood in there with me, and they kept telling me it would be okay, and eventually it was. I'm forever grateful for all of them.
Thank you, Adonis. Suzanne?
So for me, it was a little bit different because I was older. I had elderly parents who I mean, honestly, at the time, I was very ashamed to go to them. And I was also concerned I didn't want to bring any added stress to them because my dad had been very sick. So for me, mine was very private. Um, I have a daughter who is now 27, but she was in college at the time, so I didn't want to even bring her in. So I really had to muster up my own strength to get to where I needed to be. But I did get strength from my counselor at Susan B. Anthony. I went and got my own therapist. Once I was able to tell my story, I did have women who, there were other nurses, there were other directors that really empowered me. But in the beginning, it was me fighting for me. So
Thank you. Thank you. Jean, can you please talk about some of the resources that are available who find themselves in a domestic abuse situation? And also, can you give them some advice about the first practical steps that you can take when you find yourself in a situation like this?
Sure. I think the most important thing is if you or a friend or relative are experiencing the types of coercive control that we are talking about, as difficult as it is, no one expects to find themselves in a relationship that they believed was loving, to be at a space where they are now asking for assistance, but asking for assistance saves lives. And so I would say that understand that the member programs across the state of Connecticut and our Safe Connect hotline are available 24/7. Those services are not only free of charge, but they're confidential and anonymous. And why that's really important is from the survivor, like Suzanne, who is saying, she was embarrassed. She didn't really know if she felt she could reach out, and over that pervasive control, there's a sense that you're not even you're not going to be believed, and those kinds of messages live in your mind as you're trying to reach out for support. But once you do, that hotline is available to you. There are emergency sheltering services if that would be a choice. What there really is with every single telephone call or step in through a walk-in appointment, there is the opportunity to safety plan. Survivors know best the person that they are in relationship with. They know most about what that person has been threatening and whether or not those threats are ones that can be capably enforced against a victim. And so we take all of that experience and information of the survivor, and we begin to work with them to determine what is it that you think is going to be the thing that's going to keep you safest, and tell them about the range of services beyond emergency shelter and that hotline. There are counseling and advocacy opportunities. There are criminal and civil legal supports that are in place at every member organization. We have services for children. So very frequently when children are involved, we may think that children are not picking up what's happening in the home, that they're sleeping when it happens, but they know those undertones are there. They feel that there's something different. And so we have advocates who are available to work with children. And we will do accompaniments. If we have to, we will certainly meet someone at the hospital. We will take them to a medical appointment. We will help them to, if they choose to have additional behavioral health services, we will try to connect them to those. Really also because both of our survivors today talked about the the financial impact, that's really a piece of the building. After the crisis and the healing, there are opportunities to build and to refocus on that safe life beyond the crisis. And in that process, we help people to maybe look for work. Maybe somebody is in need of a certification that has lapsed. And so all of those things toward developing self-sufficiency are also very much a part of what we have. There are support groups. Every survivor's experiences, while similar, are unique, but what makes people feel really connected is when they can have an opportunity to sit in group very frequently with those who have had similar experiences, to share those experiences, and to start to get rid of some of that, that sense of guilt or shame. We say to folks all the time that, if you knew that this is where the relationship was going to end, you might have made a different choice, but you couldn't have known that then. And so now you can make your choices. And so empowering someone after the experience of crisis to make selected choices is really, really critical so that they can begin to re-engage their self-esteem and make those next steps toward their future.
Thank you. And to go back to our survivors, each of you described the challenges and the difficulties you faced, and the moment when you said, I must leave, and you did. Can you talk to us about what the transition was like, and how did you go from just surviving to thriving as you are? Adana, you want to?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it was the little things. It was going off of, oh my gosh, you don't have to be anxious in your house every day anymore, so food can stay down. It was simple things like that at first. It was just being able to breathe and feel safe at home. After not having that feels priceless. It's the ability to make a minor mistake in your house and not feel like it could cost you your life. Like, the chicken's terrible today, but it's okay. You know, simple things like that just brings a sense of normalcy back. That normal you had before the situation, for me, that was everything. It was listening to my son laugh and play again, like just a normal kid. Just hear his boys' feet running through the house. Watch him mess his room up sometimes and know that there are no dangerous ramifications for that. Uh, that really helps me in connecting and building myself again. It's being able to work and conduct myself in a business environment, in a corporate environment, and feel productive, feel like I can get the job done. Because the flip side of going through emotional abuse, it kind of puts something in your mind like, I can't do it, I can't do anything, I can't get past this. So back to normal again, you're like, I could do anything, I can do this. Throw the task at me, I've got it. And that feeling is priceless, and I wish it on everyone.
Well, you are an inspiration, Adana. Thank you. Suzanne, how about you? What was your journey?
I think it was some of the similar things. I think it was enjoying my home and being able to do things in my home that I wanted to do my way, being able to have my friends back in my home and socialize and just relax. That was huge. That was enormous. And being able to like kind of be in the yard and do yard work and garden again, because he would always stalk me and I was very fearful of being outdoors. So all those joys, I was able to embrace them again. um, Being able to drive someplace and not have him following me was it was like, oh my gosh, I'm free to go anywhere. And I feel like after I flourished, it was like, it was just like this flower opening. And I embraced my life. There was a time he had like completely ruined my self esteem. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for many years and I excel. And it was just knowing your self-worth again. And after years, I'm not having it. And then it just poof, there it is. And it was a nice feeling.
So perhaps the survivors described why Megan Scanlon had this great idea to create a survivor leadership committee. Can you talk about how this came to you and what the committee is doing?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, you obviously see two of them here today and how powerful their stories are. I can't take full credit. I actually stole this idea from the Rhode Island Coalition, to be honest with you. But it was something that, as I came into this role, was very important to me personally, having worked directly with survivors of both sexual and domestic violence in the past. I don't think you can really do the work that we do on the systems level without getting their direct feedback as to what is working and what's not working, including our own domestic violence service system in that. So the idea was to put together a statewide leadership council that informs our work that we do at the coalition, but also helps to provide feedback for our members as to what programs or programming should or could look like, or where there's opportunities for advancement or improvement, and then also what systems survivors have had good experiences with and not so good experiences with, and are there areas or room for improvement working with those systems to make sure that if for whatever reason survivor voices were not at the center of a decision-making process or a system, that how do we elevate that? So the idea is, one, for them to establish a sense of leadership and community amongst themselves. And that's what I think we've done in our first year. And then work with them on how do we use their voices to elevate the work and to improve and keep innovating the work and meeting the needs of people that are experiencing family and intimate partner violence. So that was the theory behind it. Other coalitions across the country do have survivor leadership councils. So I just wanted to bring it to Connecticut because I don't feel like you can do this work without it.
Megan, thank you so much. And I've had the opportunity to hear survivors like Adana as we do media events to try to highlight resources, raise awareness, and encourage people to get help. And they're just such incredibly powerful voices. And I think they are also the reason why we have such strong laws in our state. It's because of Megan, your advocacy and the advocacy of so many of the coalition organizations and the survivors. And so what I'd like to do is see if there are some concluding remarks that Jean and Megan would like to make. We're going to start with Jean, go to Megan, and then we're going to ask our survivors to make some final remarks. So Jean, if you have any closing thoughts.
Thank you. I do think that the really critical thing is when we learn from survivors the things that are needed, then we can share those things. And in this work, there is counseling and there is advocacy, and there is in places throughout the state where we are able to connect and to do this, there's a lot of prevention work that is happening, and an area that I see as a growth opportunity, because as we create awareness in the community to prevent these types of interpersonal violence, it really works to not only educate folks about where to come for services, but when we begin with the smallest individuals in schools and camps in our communities, and we move from there to prevent domestic and sexual violence, then we have some hope of breaking the cycles that we know that this type of violence is a part of. I just repeat what I said previously. If you or someone you know, reach out. If you don't know how to tell someone about services, you can simply hand them a card that has the hotline number, whether it's Safe Connect or one in your local area. And someone may not be able to acknowledge in that moment that they understand what you're saying, or that they even understand that they need that type of service, but sometime in the darkness of the middle of the night, they might take that number and use it, and it will save their life. And I think that's really critical.
Thank you so much, Jean. Megan?
Yeah, so I would just say that I think you've heard a little bit from both Adana and Suzanne about how important and critical it is for other systems that may not necessarily identify as like our traditional partners to be connected to our member programs and CCADV as well, because you just never know when there's the opportunity, like Adana talked about with Yale, right? It just happened that she was there and they had the resources to be able to share with her. And I think that's what I think about a lot, is how do we create more opportunities for just different systems to be at least a place to start with sharing information and resources. They don't necessarily have to be experts in domestic violence services, but they just have to know where to connect you to. So I think about that to build off of Jean's piece. That's another piece of prevention for us, is if we can intervene sooner rather than later, whether it's at a doctor's visit or a school or workplace, or any place that people are, because everybody here is not just a survivor, but they're a coworker, a colleague, friend, a mom, a daughter, so many different roles that they play in our society. And so that's what I think about, that to really make a change in domestic violence, it's absolutely the prevention piece, but also the like societal and cultural shift around sharing information, sharing resources, and also just zero tolerance of it. And so I hope that we continue to work toward that. I think if there's anybody on this Zoom that has wants more information or resources, like we have handouts, we have tear-offs, we can send all of those basic information resources to you. And I would just encourage you to get connected to your local member program and learn more about them and what they do, in case you are in a situation, whether it's you yourself or a family member or friend that needs assistance, because it is life-saving and it can be really life-changing. So I know Jean mentioned our statewide hotline. I would echo that as well, CT Safe Connect, and just echo just knowing who your member program is in your local community. We have a map on our website if you're unsure, and it breaks down all the different towns that they cover as well.
Very good. Very good. Donna?
I would just like to close out with all the systems in place. It takes policymakers like yourself to continue showing up for us. When you make laws, you're helping save our lives. The stronger the impact is, the more serious the offender is punished, the better we can move on, the safer we can feel, because it doesn't just end with leaving. There's a process after that. And for everyone and whatever space you show up in, if you are a part of impacts in that process, be sure that you're doing the research how you're making the best decisions, because we do want victims to leave, but when they leave, we want them to still be safe. And things like the family court system, they need to be in place. Better things need to be in place so that we can continue being safe and thriving and having great and safe lives. And thank you guys for all you do for the cause. It's serious. I know it's heavy. It's never going to be easy because we're talking about people staying alive, children staying alive, and things that stay with them for the rest of their life. So I would urge all of us to continue showing up in our everyday life vigilant, paying attention. You could save someone's life by just being kind to them.
Thank you so much, Adana. We appreciate you. Suzanne?
I feel the same way. I feel that for me, it was somebody actually listening. I did have a couple incidents where I was not listened to. I think there should be so much more than just the restraining order, because it doesn't always work. And in my case, it did not work at all, which was my original fear to begin with. So I think that all the advocating is fantastic. I think that we've come so far from where we were. And I think that continuing to grow our domestic violence advocacy and the laws that protect victims is just so incredibly important. And really listening to what is going on without prejudice, without any kind of judgment is so important, because I think once you're judged, it's kind of like, oh, I don't like that feeling, and I won't go any further. And I unfortunately had a couple of incidents like that, but once I found Susan B. Anthony, and I was able to go out and get a therapist that honestly to this day I still see, because I think it's healthy. It gives you the strength to move forward. Like within 6 months after everything transpired, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I think if I didn't have the advocacy of Susan B. Anthony, my advocate, my counselor, they were amazing. And my therapist, I don't know if I would have come through my treatment with the strength that I did, but I knew I had so many people behind me. And I knew if I got through the domestic violence, I was going to get through cancer. So it has such an empowering and impactful, it just really was powerful for me, and it gave me the strength. And I think about it all the time. So just keep advocating.
Thank you so much. You all are just so incredibly powerful advocates, and we appreciate you. You are all role models. I hope that you will take a moment to visit the Council on Women and Girls website. We have all kinds of information, past meetings, and other panels on this topic that you can find on our YouTube page. And the links to those are in our chat. Our next Women in Leadership panel will take place November 14th from 11 a.m. to 12:30. And it's going to highlight some of our state's Native American women leaders in honor of Native American Heritage Month. We're very excited about it. We've got some fabulous female Indigenous leaders that we will be showcasing on that date. And let us know if you have any ideas for future panels. I want to thank everyone again. Our panelists were absolutely terrific, and we appreciate all of you sharing your time. So thank you all so much for coming. Appreciate it.